Welcome to a new realm of insights into the Korean Peninsula. At Korea Risk Group, we delve deep into the complexities of North and South Korea, offering bespoke analyses that empower decision makers. Whether you're in government, business, or academia, our tailored solutions provide clarity in an opaque region. Let our team guide your strategy with data-driven insights and on-the-ground intelligence. Step into a world of informed decision-making and visit KoreaRiskGroup.com today. Hello listeners and welcome to the NK News podcast. This episode was recorded on Tuesday, the 1st of October 2024, and I'm joined via StreamYard by my colleague Shreyas Reddy. Shreyas, welcome back on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And happy Armed Forces Day here in the Republic of Korea.
Indeed.
Do you know why they chose this day for Armed Forces Day?
I have a feeling you're about to tell me, Jacco.
I am about to tell you and our listeners. 74 years ago today, the Republic of Korea's 23rd Infantry Regiment, 3rd Division, crossed the 38th parallel into North Korea on the east coast. So they turned the defense into an offense in the Korean War and started to invade North Korean territory, hoping to knock out the Korean People's Army and avoid a re-flare-up. They did not see, of course, a couple of months later that the Chinese were going to join the war on the North Korean side. But anyway, that's why they chose October 1st, because this is the day that the Korean army went over the 38th parallel into North Korea.
Yeah.
All right, so we've chosen a couple of stories. There's a lot going on this week. Let's talk about the new Prime Minister of Japan, Shigeru Ishiba. He already is quite famous in Korean affairs. He's been to North Korea. So tell us a bit about him. What should we need to know?
Well, I think the first thing when it comes to Shigeru Ishiba is that in Japanese political circles, he has long had a reputation as being a bit of a maverick. Despite coming from a political family himself, like many top Japanese politicians, he's perhaps best known for being a little more outspoken, a little more willing to go against the grain and push back against senior leaders. So in Japan's ruling party, he has typically not fared well in leadership elections. In the past, he has lost 4 times.
Right, he has
Despite
run for
being
the prime ministership before, hasn't he?
the leadership of the ruling party, which effectively makes him the prime minister in most cases. So, in fact, he's set to be sworn in later today, or set to be elected if Parliament confirms him as the prime minister today. But for now, he's still just the leader of the ruling party at the time of recording. But yeah, so he's run for that post 4 times before, and he's very popular with the general public and the lower party levels of the Liberal Democratic Party's membership, the grassroots membership. But the lawmakers typically don't trust him because he tends to be a little outside the establishment, shall we say, in terms of how he approaches things. But this time, fifth time of asking, he seems to have come out on top, perhaps possibly due to the party's own decline in popularity ahead of the general election. They probably figured they could do with someone who the public actually likes.
Right. Yeah, and he's, as I said, he's been to North Korea back in the 1990s as a part of a parliamentary delegation, and he served as Minister for State Defense and then Defense Minister in the noughties. So he's not a stranger to North Korea and Korea-related affairs.
Indeed. So, in fact, the 1992 visit to North Korea, when you're still just a junior lawmaker, I think it was second term, that played a big part in getting him interested in security affairs in the region, seeing, there's a threat that was right in Japan's backyard that very openly hated Japan. And so I think just getting that taste of anti-Japan propaganda, seeing this very militaristic country, he thought, okay, this is a country worth keeping an eye on. And so over the years, I think his policies have also kind of reflected his interests have reflected his passion for defense and security issues. So as defense minister, as junior defense minister, he's held lots of different posts over the years where there was that focus, but also it kind of shaped his approach to Japan's military, where he for a long time pushed for Japan's militarization, a topic that is obviously of concern to South Korea as well, not just North Korea and many countries in the region. But at the same time, he's perhaps, even though he's seen as a defense hawk by in compared to some other people in that party, he is a moderate, so he's willing to show perhaps a little more willingness to compromise. For example, saying we need to acknowledge South Korea's grievances over historical disputes, over their treatment under colonial rule, even though at the same time he opposes things like South Korean court awarding damages to forced labor victims against Japanese companies.
Ah, yes. Okay. And he also has an interesting approach to North Korea too. What's his point? His stance on sanctions?
So he has traditionally just questioned their effectiveness. So like many Japanese politicians, one of the overarching concerns with North Korea is how do we get them to address the issue of the abduction of Japanese nationals in the 1970s and 80s.
Yes,
And
right. The abduction
Ishiba
issue,
has
which is a forever issue in Japan.
Exactly. And Ishiba has always said we need to have direct engagement. We need to have liaison offices in Pyongyang and Tokyo
Right.
to be able to have regular communication, not just back channel communications. And to do that, are sanctions the way to go? He says no. He says that fundamentally is a disincentive for dialogue. So he hasn't explicitly said that as leader he will push to remove sanctions. Frankly, it might be hard for him to push back against the establishment and how things are currently done, especially if he also wants to keep the US on board. But
Mm.
we do know that personally he does not think it's the best strategy.
Right. Yeah. So having a liaison office in Pyongyang, that would be very interesting. Having a summit would also be interesting. Do we have any sense whether North Korea might be interested in that kind of contact with Japan at this time?
Well, frankly, at this point, North Korea has been quite open about the fact that it has no interest in talks with Japan, frankly, or anyone else. But
Right.
earlier this year, the Kim Jong Un's sister stated that Pyongyang will pay no attention to and reject any contact and negotiations with the Japanese side. As
Yeah.
far as North Korea is concerned, they've already resolved the abductee issue, so they're not willing to talk to Japan about it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's leave that there for a moment, and let's go on now to Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. He was at the United Nations in New York recently, and he talked about. He actually mentioned North Korea in discussing the war that Russia is waging against his country. Tell us about that.
Well, as one can imagine, with Ukraine, the biggest concern is Russia. And on that front, of late, we've certainly seen a lot of concern coming from Ukrainian officials about Russia's weapons imports from North Korea, essentially saying that North Korea is their leading supplier of munitions right now, of artillery being used to kill Ukrainians. And so they've accused Russia of making North Korea and Iran de facto accomplices in what Zelensky describes as a criminal war. And so he continued denouncing Russia, of course, but also criticized North Korea effectively for supporting Russia's efforts. And so that's and it's not just him, of course. We're even at the same meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also backed that and said fundamentally North Korea is delivering trainloads of weapons and ammunition to Russia. This includes
Mm.
ballistic missiles, artillery, launchers, everything, and essentially saying you are killing, you are supporting Russia's efforts to kill innocent Ukrainians, and so fundamentally condemning North Korea for supporting Russia's war efforts.
Did North Korea make any kind of a statement through its diplomats at the United Nations to respond to this?
North Korea's United Nations representative only really spoke last night. So his focus was more about confirming North Korea's nuclear status more than anything else. But
Mm.
we have already seen a direct condemnation from Kim Yo Jong again. So
Right.
she's certainly had an active week. essentially, in a statement released through the state-owned Korean Central News Agency, she accused as she put it, the malicious Zelensky clique of killing innocent Russian citizens. So a bit of turnaround about there, and
Wow.
rejecting the accusations of North Korea being an accomplice in Ukraine's war efforts. So I think that's kind of where the approach she's been going with.
Right. Okay. Well, I suppose we could have expected that. Now, you've written an interesting story for NK Pro quite recently on North Korean IT workers who are often found working for countries around the world. But of course, the people who hire them don't know they're North Korean. And there's been a warning that's been released by Mandiant, the IT security firm owned by Google. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, it's an issue that a lot of countries and the UN have increasingly been, or at least the UN, the former UN panel of experts, have increasingly been raising in the last few years about North Korea deploying about 10,000 estimated overseas IT workers to other
That
countries.
is a lot.
Yeah, so and essentially earning millions for the North Korean regime's nuclear and missile development, and
Yeah,
uh,
it's certainly
fundament
probably more lucrative, I guess, per person than woodcutters in Russia, I would imagine.
Certainly, I think fundamentally you can just have someone sitting behind a computer taking up lots of different jobs, and that
Yes.
seems to be the model right now, earning lots of money.
Oh my
Mostly, they
goodness.
seem to target Western companies, so U.S. tech firms and other sectors where they can perhaps get a little more value for money in a sense,
Wow.
in terms of their efforts. Mostly while sitting behind a laptop somewhere in Russia, China, China perhaps more so, but certainly, and also in Southeast Asia, parts of Africa, reportedly.
Right. Wow. Now, they're not native speakers of English, so I wonder where they're pretending to be from.
Well, to be honest, I think they seem to be managing fine in their own unique way. So, taking up different, they end up impersonating real individuals. So, could be from, for example, I think they've gone and linked themselves to certain universities in Southeast Asia or elsewhere to say that this is where our background is from. So, Singapore, Japan, Hong Kong, they've kind of just to not appear North Korean, but at the same time not necessarily appear native US
Right.
employees. And so fundamentally, what they do is they often have brokers based in countries like China who will
Mm-hmm.
then go deal with other people who perhaps in the case of the US, there have been a couple of cases recently where the US authorities charged middlemen working in who possibly low-level criminals, but essentially we don't really know too much about them. But they
Ah,
fundamentally operated these large-scale laptop farms where they
right.
would basically reach out, they would receive laptops from US companies on behalf of these IT workers who had secured jobs under
Yep.
fraudulent identities. And so
Wow.
they'd receive them at a address and just use, and the workers would then use remote access tools to log into these laptops to connect to the company networks to do whatever they need to do. And for the most part, it seems that they essentially did their job because they were
Right.
there to earn money. But at the same time, they essentially also got access to companies' internal networks. So
Yeah.
for all we know, they could have used that opportunity to just deploy some malware that some point in the future they could use to do other things like steal money or wreak
Right.
havoc on the systems, just disrupt their operations. Yeah.
Yeah. So the danger for companies is that not only is it a breach of sanctions in hiring North Koreans, it's
Yeah.
also potentially leaving the back door open for either theft or malware or something like that. So, what advice does Mandiant give to Western companies to avoid this happening to them, unwittingly hiring North Korean tech workers?
Well, to be honest, a lot of it is what you would expect they should be doing anyway. Just
Yeah.
some common sense approaches to recruitment. For one thing, I think a lot of these overseas IT workers, when they apply for jobs, they will, during interviews or during meetings, they will not turn their cameras on. They will essentially try and remain offline. That way, people won't know that they're not the folks
Yep.
who applied. So you think that should already be a part of the measures, just once in a while ask people to turn their cameras on, especially during an interview. So also there should be more stringent background checks, including possibly in some cases collecting biometric information or identity proof.
Right.
And also recruiters will need more training on the fact that this is a problem. This is something that you need to know. A
Yeah.
lot of these employees, they may also be using real people's identities. So just do some reverse searches for the photos, for the details that are given. Maybe monitor for artificial intelligence tools used to modify profile pictures. At this point, there are verification tools that can do that. And
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally, if you're sending a laptop to someone, your company property to someone to be able to work on something, make sure
Yes.
that it is in the location that it's meant to be. So I think just essentially the idea is keep an eye out, make sure that you take a common sense approach to this, where do your due diligence on whom you're hiring and how they're working for you.
Right. Now, lastly, a story that you didn't know we were going to talk about today, but I just saw it on the NK News website. This is going to be interesting for people who visit North Korea. Pyongyang now has a new subway station, or I should say more accurately, it now has a new subway station name. And that is because the reunification station, or Tongil-yok, has been given a new name, Moranbong Station. This is all part of the removing words like unification from the discourse in North Korea. What do you think about that?
I mean, this is something that we've been expecting for a while anyway. I think it was flagged earlier this year that the old name was removed, but at that point the new name was still not visible. So
Right.
earlier this
And in some
year,
cases, they simply covered up the old name on the map with a bit of paper.
pretty much, yeah. And on digital displays, it would just say station, nothing else. So you
Yeah.
couldn't really say what it was meant to be. But now it appears that it's been renamed Moranbong. So Moranbong Station, and it's fairly common name in North Korea. It's a district in Pyongyang. It's a
Right.
prominent location from Moranbong Hill. And of course, for a lot of people who aren't that familiar with North Korea, they may also recognize it from the Moranbong band,
Mm.
North Korea's famed girl group.
Yes. Yeah, and we can thank our friends over at the North Korean Archives and Library, NKAAL, who tweeted some photographs of the new station name at the end of
Yeah,
September. I've
yeah,
interviewed that gentleman on this podcast recently, so that's interesting. Once again, it'll be we're seeing little by little changes made in North Korea to remove unification from the discourse. We can expect on the
yeah.
7th of this month, so in about 6 days from now, that there'll be some kind of a constitutional reform, and we'll see how they deal with the unification issue there. So something to look forward to.
Definitely. I was going to say sites like this will also be interesting, hopefully in the near future, to get more information about how they change physically, because it's not just the names, right? They've also all these symbols all over, all these so different ways in which they reflect that unification ideal. So, as you said, obviously in the upcoming parliamentary session, we should see
Yeah,
an official change, but there'll no doubt the efforts to keep wiping away those traces of the unification goal physically will probably still take some time.
it will do indeed. Yes. And thanks again for coming on the show today, Shreyas, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks a lot.
Bestsellers unveiled at NK News Shop. Step out in style with our top-selling apparel from the NK News Shop. Fly high with the Air Cordial T-shirt, celebrating DPRK's golden era of aviation in vintage airline chic. Explore the stars with our Nada hoodie, inspired by North Korea's answer to NASA. Or toast to tradition with our Taedonggang beer T-shirt, capturing the essence of North Korea's renowned brew. Each design is a conversation starter. Find yours at shop.nknews.org. Again, that's shop.nknews.org. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our podcast episode for today. Our thanks go to Brian Betts and Alana Hill for facilitating this episode, And to our post-recording producer genius, Gabby Magnuson, who cuts out all the extraneous noises, awkward silences, bodily functions, and fixes the audio levels. Thank you, and listen again next time.